Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this tutorial, we're going to start looking at Spring Expression Language, or SPEL, that's S-P-E-L for short. So I've got this project with two beans defined. They're called robot and random text. And here's my robot class. And we've seen this in a previous tutorial, and we've just got two fields, ID and speech. We've got set methods for those fields. We've got a speak method that outputs those fields, basically. And we're calling the method to output the fields from our main application. I've also got a random text class here, and that's also defined as a bean in my XML. And what this random text class does is it's got three random texts, and it's got a method here that outputs one of those three texts at random. So it just randomly chooses a text and returns it, I should say, rather than outputs, and it's called getText. So I'm going to show you something in a minute with this method, but first let's tackle something even simpler. So in the beans.xml, here I've got this robot defined, and I'm going to add a couple of setters, a couple of properties to set values, the ID and speech fields of this robot. So let's go to the beans tab of this beans.xml and right click robot and go to beans insert property element, and I've got a property called ID which I'm going to set to the value 1234. I'll save that, and I've got another property that I'm going to set, so I'll right click again and go to beans insert property on robot, and I want to set the property called speech, and I'll set the value to let's set it to, well, what's the default? Let's take a look. The default is hello, so I'm going to set it to I am a robot, just something different, and let's save that. So if we look at the source now and maybe format it, it doesn't seem to make any difference. I don't know why not. Okay, well anyway, it's good. So here we're setting these two properties, and if we run this application now, then hopefully, oh, we've got a error for some reason, and I'm not really sure why that is. Let's just take a look at, yeah, we've got a bean called robot. It's set correctly, and I've got the package, I hope, specified correctly, and in app.java I'm getting my robot bean. Let's just make sure I'm running the right application. Run this as a Java application. There we go. So there we go. I'm just running the wrong application there. So this is all stuff we've seen before. I'm just taking a bean and I'm setting a couple of properties, and it says down here 1234 I am a robot. So we've successfully set those from the XML. Now there's another way of setting values of things that is more flexible and allows you to use this thing called SPEL, Spring Expression Language. Let's take the ID as an example for a start. And what I'm going to do, within these speech marks, where at the moment I've just typed 1234, I'm going to first add a hash sign like this, or I think in America it's called a pound sign, or in the UK we call it a hash sign. And following this hash or pound sign, I'm going to insert two curly parentheses. So let's see. There we go, those are the ones that I want. So the curly parentheses, like the ones you use when you're defining the body of a method. So you've got a hash and open and close curly parentheses. I don't want that square one in there. And that's all within double quotes. And that's the value of the value attribute of the property tag there for the bean. And within these curly parentheses, I can write Spring Expression Language. So a simple example would be just to put a number in. Let's put in 77 and run that. And you can see we've set the value 77 there for this property. That's not much use because we could do that without Spring Expression Language, and then we could miss out the hash or pound sign and the parentheses. But we can write stuff in here like arithmetical expressions. For example, we could put 77 plus 55. Again, not massively useful, but let me just show you that it works. And so that says 132. And let's copy that, and I'll also use it to set this value here of I am a robot. And again, just to give you a simple demonstration, I could have two strings in here. I'll use single quotes to surround the strings because I can't use double quotes within these existing double quotes. And let's put my name is colon. And actually I'll just run that. So if we run this now, it says my name is. And I can use like string concatenation, like a plus sign, to say, to concatenate another string in double quotes. Let's put in Arnie. And if I run that, then it says my name is Arnie. So not much use in itself, but the great thing is you can call methods and do various other things. Like you can even fetch system properties in Spell. And I'm going to show you here an example of accessing a method or property of another bean. So we've got this bean random text, and that is defined using this random text class. And let's supposing I want to use the value of this getText method, which returns at random one of these three pieces of text, and I want to use it to set the this property, this speech property in robot. So the property we want to set in robot is called speech because it has this setter method, setSpeech, and I want to set it using a property called text from random text because the property is called text because the set method is getText. So if I go to beans.xml now, and in my Spring expression language, here's the property I want to set. It's called speech, and I'm going to clear everything out between these curly parentheses. So I've still got that hash sign in the curly parentheses, and now I'm going to put in here the bean ID random text. And then let's put in get text and round brackets, so we're getting the text from this method. And if I run that now, we see that we've got we've called that method and set the value of this property using that method. Let's just run it again. It says get out now. If I run it again, it says I want your clothes, boots and motorcycle. And so it's that method is randomly selecting text, and we're wiring it into this property. And as always, you could use you could concatenate strings in here. So I could put something in single quotes like random text, and then concatenate with a plus sign the result of calling that method. So you can do quite a lot of funky stuff in Spell, in the Spring expression language. There we have the result. I think for this tutorial, I just want to show you one more thing, probably, which is so we're calling getText here, but because the property is defined as having the name text, I can just type text like that, and it will still work. So if I run this now, so we're accessing a property of a bean, but as we've seen, a property of a bean, the name of it is just defined usually by what get method or set method exists. So if there's a method getText, then the property is called text, and we can access that directly. I think, one last thing that I'll show you in this tutorial, which is something quite useful, which is supposing we are using, let's say we want to set the ID based on the length of this text, which is kind of a stupid thing to do, but it's a good example for what I want to show you. So I'm just going to copy this random text.text and paste it in here to set the ID. And we would want to say random text.text.length. And let's save that. I think that won't work because the length of a string depends on a method called length. So there's no property there. It would have to be getLength for this to work. Let's put brackets in. So we're calling the length method of the string property that is returned from the getText method here. So random text.text.length, and let's see if that works. Now it works, and we've set the length of this text apparently is 42, which I'm having a hard time believing. Well, it's not the length of this text because every time I access this text property, it calls this method getText, which selects a new random string. So we don't therefore expect that this length will be corresponding to this text. Let's just change this back to getText here, because I want to leave you with examples of both ways of doing this. Let's just run this again, and also that helps to emphasize that this text is not necessarily the same as this text. There we go. So now the thing that I want to show you is, supposing this method getText, which we're accessing via the text property here, returns null, then we can't access the length method. But what we can do is we can use a special operator that says only access this if this here is not null. So let's go to random text here and just return null for the moment and comment out the original value, and let's run this, and we see that at least if I save it and run it, it should crash. I suspect I'm unfortunately editing the wrong file here. Let's get rid of that and make sure I've got the right file and return null. Hazards of developing too many projects at the same time. Now let's run it again. Okay, so now we've got an error because we'll have some kind of null pointer error. We can't instantiate the bean anymore because we can't set that property, because we're calling method length on a null value. And now what we can do to fix that is, if we go to beans.xml, instead of accessing length using a dot, we can access it using a question mark and dot. So now if I run it, it works, and we've just wired in null for this value here. So the question mark dot operator will only access this if the preceding thing is not null, which is quite handy. And now let's go back and wire in the original stuff, because it was nice how it worked before. And maybe here I can just put in null, so that sometimes we'll need that question mark dot operator. So there we go. So sometimes it's going to come out with null, but usually we're going to actually get a good value for it, like 8 here, 4 here. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. My brain seems to be shutting down, but hopefully you get the gist of that. Very simply, using this expression language, we can access properties, or we can call methods and use the return values of those to set bean properties, and we can use this question mark dot in cases where the property accessed might be null, and we want to try to access some further method or property of that property. So that's it for this time, and until next time, happy coding.